Knowing your numbers with confidence and clarity is vital. As someone who generates revenue for your practice, you cannot leave the understanding of your value and the tracking of your productivity to chance. Welcome to The PA is In, the show created by PAs for PAs, where codependency with your supervising physician is a thing of the past, optimal team practice is the future, and physician associate has taken the place of physician assistant as the professional title of choice. I'm Tracy Bingaman, and I'm obsessed with redefining what success as a PA looks like and what it feels like. Here you'll find the mindset shifts, systems, and processes I use to escape healthcare burnout and integrate my work into my life. Work-life balance is a myth, and an integrated life where you thrive professionally, not a balancing act, is the goal here. My mission is to help you to grow into a unicorn PA who loves their job, has abundant energy, time to spare, and work-optional financial freedom. The PA is in. If you only take one sheet of paper to your next negotiation, let it be the PA Pay One Sheet. It's a tool designed to walk you through setting up the ideal outcomes, assessing the situation you are negotiating in, and it even includes a reminder of which negotiation skills you can use. Stop what you are doing. Download the one sheet, print it out, fill it out, and literally bring it to the table with you when you are negotiating next. It's designed specifically to work in healthcare settings wherever you are. You can use the PA One Sheet to get the best deal, the biggest raise, and to help your confidence walking into your next negotiation. Head to www.tracybingaman.com/one, that's ONE, to download your free copy of the PA Pay One Sheet and start prepping for your next negotiation today. It's linked in the show notes, but in case you missed it, it's at www.tracybingaman.com/ONE. You've probably heard by now that you need to know your value as a provider, right? If you ask me, it should be right at the top of your priority list as a clinician. Seriously, knowing your revenue, your numbers, the amount of money that you are generating for your practice, and how it translates directly into value for your group, organization, or department is right up there with clinical competency and the ability to communicate clearly. These are skills that you need to have. And today we're going to unpack the reasons that you need to know your revenue numbers this year. I've been toting knowing your numbers, truly the unsung hero of clinical practice, and how it is vital for everything from landing your next raise to increasing the number of providers supporting your patients if you have a growing practice. Have you ever wondered why the administrators and practice managers care so much about that end of the month RVU spreadsheet that they send you? What's the big deal with the data? How could truly having a handle on your numbers, your revenue, and understanding your productivity and your value as a provider change your understanding of your objective value and your negotiating power, stance, and approach? Here's the deal. Knowing your numbers with confidence and clarity is vital. As someone who generates revenue for your practice, you cannot leave the understanding of your value and the tracking of your productivity to chance. It's not enough to simply know how much revenue you're generating. You need to understand the impact you are having personally on the bottom line for your practice or department. Really getting your hands around those numbers is so important. Great reviews and positive feedback from patients and colleagues are great, but they on your own are not enough to land you a raise or prove an increasing need in your department. Similarly, just saying that you're overworked and doing more than ever and seeing more patients and that you need help doesn't often result in hiring another provider, even when you know that the need is there. Knowing your numbers means that you don't have to show up empty-handed to your next performance review. The solid working knowledge of value add is often the missing piece of many negotiations for providers. Let me simplify your efforts in this area. You should have two focuses when it comes to your own personal data and productivity. Number one, accurately tracking your specific revenue, number of visits, RVUs, and in summary, knowing your numbers. Number two, understanding the trends where you fall on the benchmarks and being able to translate those numbers into the value you provide to the practice. So without further ado, here are the top 5 reasons I'd give you to urge you to get to know your numbers ASAP, as in this month, as in this year. Let 2023 be the year that you develop a solid understanding of the objective value that you add to your clinical practice. Number 1, you take back control of tracking the numbers. With many variables that are beyond your control and someone else determining the input, the tracking, and the formula that they are using, it's important that you have a system to track your own volumes, values, and data. If your practice has a lot of transparency in the form of a revenue spreadsheet or an RVU report that they are generating at the end of the month, you can use your tracking to compare your numbers to their numbers. If you've been tracking your numbers for a while and they run consistently on par with the reports your team is generating, you can feel more confident in those reports. On the other hand, if you've never tracked your own numbers and you've been relying on that spreadsheet that they're giving you, it behooves you to verify the validity of the data your practice is generating. Having a system for tracking each day's visits, logging each type of visit, whether it's consult, a new patient, an established visit, or an acute visit, and the billing code, and maybe even the duration of the visit. Essentially, what you're going to want to do is track whatever pertinent data is going to help you calculate your billing codes and the revenue generated during that time period. This puts you boots on the ground, hands on the numbers, intimately aware of what you're doing for your patients, how much you're doing, how many patients you're seeing, and the impact you're having on your practice. Number 2, by tracking your own numbers, you'll spot trends sooner. I now work in a situation where my compensation is partly based on my personal productivity. Never have I been more diligent with tracking and trending my productivity than I have in this position. By tracking my own numbers, I can spot early trends and change my visits accordingly. I am poised to pivot and make adjustments to my schedule as needed when I spot these trends. This means I'm able to adapt quicker, make changes, set goals, and track my progress on a daily and weekly basis without having to wait for an end of month or end of quarter report that is generated by someone else. You can be ready if you see those numbers dip to make adjustments. And on the other hand, if you're really feeling overwhelmed, if you've been seeing more patients than ever, you can be proactive about getting help, about building boundaries, and about keeping a reasonable schedule, even when the demands of your practice are trending towards getting you to do more and more and more. It helps you to be in a position where you don't have to compromise your patients' care, and you can continue to make sure that they get what they need and have the data to back you if you're going to ask for more providers, for more clinical or clerical support in whatever situation you are in. Reason 3, it bypasses murky information. Some practices and organizations are better than others when it comes to transparency and showing you the numbers. Whether that's because your organization simply doesn't want to show you the revenue that you're bringing in, which is my personal opinion, likely because it would lead to you asking for a raise. Or if it's simply due to the fact that they aren't organized enough to share that information regularly with you, sometimes the transparency simply isn't there. Knowing your numbers and tracking this on your own means that you are no longer relying on your team to tell you the value that you're adding to the practice. It essentially takes you from the passenger seat to the driver's seat of your own productivity and gives you intimate knowledge of the value that you're adding to that practice on a regular basis.
One of my very favorite things about being a podcaster is crossing paths with other incredible podcasters. If you love this show, especially when I share about my experience with healthcare burnout and recovery, you're going to want to check out the podcast, Burnout, What I've Learned So Far, hosted by my friend Meg Letty. Meg is a former CT surgery PA turned advocate for healthcare provider wellness. Turn in to hear how she recovered from burnout and integrated well-being into her life to create a life of dreams, not nightmares. Add Burnout, What I Have Learned So Far with Meg Letty to your podcast queue to start your journey to wellness and healing today.
Number 4, it arms you with information. At some point, someone is going to want to know what value you are adding to that practice. The administrators will wonder whether their return on investment is good or not. And that return on investment, the investment that they're making, is in you. They are investing in your services every 2 weeks when that paycheck hits your account. Someone, somewhere, will at some point want to count the beans. They will want to see what kind of revenue you're generating. They will want to see what the return is on that investment of your salary and your benefits and your compensation package. When you have a file that contains your trends, your productivity, your efficiency, and the objective value that you add to that organization, you are poised and ready to answer the question, what value do you add to this practice? I had this happen in a surgical practice where I worked early in my career. I was absolutely positively not tracking my numbers. And to be completely honest, I had no idea in my practice anyone would come asking for proof that I was busy, profitable, or an asset to that practice. I was seeing consults in the hospital. I was first assisting on all of our surgical cases, discharging patients, arranging follow-up, working with social work, seeing patients in the clinic, teeing them up for surgery. I was a busy bee juggling inpatient and outpatient demands for our growing practice. I felt confident that if anyone looked at what I was doing, like actually looked at where I was at any given time of day, followed me around for a day or a week, or checked my schedule, they would see just how much I was doing. However, I didn't have my own clinic schedule at the time. The surgeon and I ran off of one joint schedule, which is something that I would advise you against because the billing gets murky and it becomes less clear what you are doing and what your other providers are doing. So eventually, when I did have my own clinic template, my surgeon was getting the majority of the credit. So I'm going to say credit as in quote unquote, was getting attributed the RVUs for outpatient visits in the way that the billing was set up. So at the time, the EMR that we used, I was being entered as the performing provider, and my surgeon was being entered as the billing provider for things like Medicare and certain private insurances. Honestly, at the time, I had no idea what any of this even meant. So I was the performing provider. My surgeon was the billing provider. But what I learned was I was like 6 months into my time at this practice, and an administrator asked me to sort of show my work and say, hey, what have you been doing during this time? All of those visits that had my surgeon as the billing provider were getting credited to them, and that revenue was getting placed in their revenue bucket. So I was doing the work. I was seeing the patient. I was doing the H&P. I was getting them set up for the OR. I was doing the lion's share of this visit. Because of the way insurance enrollment was at the time, my surgeon was getting credit. So all of that work was getting lost in the fact that it wasn't being credited to me. So they said, Tracy, what are you doing? And I said, I'm doing this and I'm doing that. And these are all the patients that I'm seeing. These are all the roles that I'm filling. These are all the things that I'm doing. And then they said, we're not sure what you're doing from a productivity standpoint, but your surgeon is having like a record-breaking year. Their numbers are through the roof. So I wasn't appropriately being credited for the work that I was doing, which happens in surgical practices a lot. Another area to be aware of numbers-wise, if you do work in a surgical practice or if you're doing pre-op or post-op global visits that aren't strictly billable but are part of that global period, is that those are associated with a portion of revenue for that surgery. So when this happens, when you're seeing pre- and post-op globals, when you're seeing non-billable visits, there are several important considerations. Number 1, what time are you freeing up for other revenue generating providers to do with during that time? So if you're seeing all of the pre-ops and all of the post-ops and you're offloading that from, say you work in a surgical practice, your surgeon's schedule, what value does that surgeon's time have? Are they able to see new consults? Are they able to see revenue generating things? How much is that time earning them because you are offloading those items from their plate? And number 2, what percentage of that global fee are you responsible for? And is there some way that you can track and capture that as a part of your numbers? Reason 5, when you know the data, you can apply the data. At one of the jobs I've held in the past working in general surgery, I worked for an organization that generated this end-of-month RVU spreadsheet for each provider. So there was a face sheet tracking our data, which had me and other people in our department and a rating on where I fell from a percentile standpoint against a set revenue point. So what percentage was I in? 70th, 80th, 90th percentile on that sheet. Behind that sheet was a detailed breakdown of each code for outpatient visits, for inpatient consults, for OR first assisting fees that had been generated for that specific month. So it worked on a rolling basis. And sometimes payments for services lagged behind, and this affected when those cases were actually added to the spreadsheet. By tracking my own cases, I could easily compare the numbers that we were being kind of tracking, the amount of surgeries that we're doing, and the numbers that were being generated in the report. So I had a record of all the cases that I had scrubbed, and I could hold that up and I could compare it to the patients that I was getting credited for as a part of that report. So one year, for example, there were 8 colon resections missing at the end of the year. So having tracked my own cases, I was able to know more accurately what I was doing, the revenue that I had likely generated. And even if they had fallen off or gone missing or never made it onto the report in the first place, I was able to say, this is a number of cases that I was doing. And knowing those numbers holds the administrative team accountable for accurate tracking. Because if you're not checking their work, things could be going missing. And this is a really big piece of negotiations and of proving your value and of answering that question, what value are you truly adding to this practice? So I just want to encourage you to be diligent about your tracking and save those RVU spreadsheets too. So when they come, file them away, keep them organized. You can use them for future jobs. You can use them to show your productivity or where you fall on the percentiles, if that's something that would be attractive to a potential employer. One time I pitched a potential employer, which was a local private practice surgeon partnership, using my RVU data for my previous job. So I showed them the most commonly performed procedures that I did as a general surgery PA, and I extrapolated that billing. I shared the amount of revenue potential that the practice could earn from the investment in a revenue generating member of the team like myself. I talked about how each of the surgeons' revenue potential would go up, their quality of life would improve. Here's what sort of time freedom that they would have by me seeing some of their patients. I, in the end, didn't end up landing that job, but it certainly wasn't because they didn't see the upside or the potential ROI on my salary. So by putting that together in a report, I had clearly shown, yes, investing in me as a team member is going to cost you money, but here's the upside revenue potential. Here's what I've made for practices in the past. Here are the ways that you can really use me to increase your clinical practice, to use me to maximize your billing and your other providers' productivity. Knowledge is power, and applied knowledge, specifically knowing these numbers, knowing how much revenue you're generating, knowing how many patients you're seeing, and using them to your advantage and to help make sure your patients are getting the care that they need is power that you can literally take it to the bank. You can use it as a part of a negotiation. You can use it as a part of saying, here's how much value I'm adding. Here's why we need a new team member. Here's why we need more clerical support. Here's how we could be more efficient. All of these things stem from getting your hands around those numbers. If all that doesn't get you excited for a little spreadsheet action, I don't know what will. And in the interest of full disclosure, I love a good spreadsheet. So we do have an upcoming episode of specifically what to track, how to extrapolate what your revenue is from your RVU data, and what to do if your organization is seriously lacking in transparency when it comes to them sharing your numbers and really giving you the breadcrumbs or the clues that you need to put this whole puzzle together so you can get a good idea of the value that you add. If you are looking for a way to apply your numbers, head to tracybigman.com/ONE. It's the PA Pay One Sheet. It's a way to sort of put together this value add proposition that you have and to use that effectively to negotiate for more money. I just had a listener who reached out, who used the PA Pay One Sheet, who used some of the scripting and some of the tools in there and got a $20,000 raise. And this was a relatively new graduate working in a surgical subspecialty. So, upcoming episode on what to track, how to track it, how to extrapolate and fill in those missing pieces if you don't have all of the pieces of that puzzle. So make sure that you click follow and subscribe so you won't miss that upcoming episode. If this episode has been helpful to you, if you enjoy the PA is in, if you feel like this has great value and is serving as an uplifting reminder for you as a part of your career, I would so love it if you would take a moment to leave a review, to send this episode to a friend, and to spread the word far and wide. That's all for today. Until next time, this PA is out. Congratulations, you've just joined an awesome club. By listening to a full episode of The PA is in, you are officially on the Unicorn PA team. Welcome aboard. What most team members do is they subscribe to the podcast because that allows them to automatically get the latest episode of the show. The life of your dreams exists on the other side of taking action. Keep making small shifts and keep getting better. Your life will improve, your career will soar, and you will have the confidence you need to create your own success. I will see you in the next episode. This PA is out.